the object that shouldn't exist. Something unusual is unfolding in deep space. And for the first time in decades, the world's top space agencies are no longer acting calm or predictable. Quietly, behind closed doors, global monitoring systems have shifted into a higher state of alert. The reason is not an asteroid from our own solar system, not a rogue comet, and not space debris. It is something far more unsettling. An interstellar object, only the third ever confirmed to enter our solar system from another star system, has done something no natural body is supposed to do. It changed direction. Not gradually, not due to gravity, not because of solar heating. It moved sideways. This object, now widely referred to by astronomers as 3I Atlas, arrived at incredible speed, following a trajectory that initially made sense under known physics. Calculations suggested it would pass close to the sun, curve slightly due to gravity, and then exit the solar system forever. That's how these visitors behave. Except this one didn't. As it disappeared behind the sun, astronomers expected it to reappear exactly where orbital models predicted. But when it finally came back into view, the math collapsed. The object was missing from its expected position by over 1 million kilometers. That isn't a rounding error. That isn't a telescope glitch. That is a violation of orbital mechanics. Normally, comets can drift slightly because of outgassing, jets of vapor pushing them forward or backward like a weak thruster. But lateral movement, sideways motion through space, that would require a force strong enough to overpower gravity itself. And there was no natural explanation. This is when something historic happened. For the first time since its creation, the International Asteroid Warning Network, a United Nations endorsed planetary defense coalition, began actively tracking an interstellar object. Until now, its mission was limited to threats born inside our solar system. So why break that rule now? Officially, the explanation was simple: improving observation accuracy. Unofficially, astronomers noticed something else. Hundreds of telescopes were suddenly redirected. Observation time was reassigned. Monitoring schedules were doubled. It was as if Earth itself had decided to keep its eyes locked on this single object. Independent researchers were the first to speak publicly. By comparing real-time telescope data with NASA's own orbital predictions, they confirmed the impossible. 3I Atlas wasn't drifting randomly. It was maintaining a consistent displacement, as if following a corrected path. Even more disturbing, the movement showed intention. The shift was clean, controlled, and precise. Not chaotic, not explosive, calculated. Then came the silence. During the same period, NASA's Mars orbiters were perfectly positioned to capture close-range images of the object during its solar pass. Yet none of those images were released. Not one. No press briefing. No public explanation. Just silence. Astrophysicists began asking uncomfortable questions. If this was routine comet behavior, why hide the data? Why involve planetary defense systems? Why elevate tracking priority for something that wasn't heading toward Earth? One respected Harvard astrophysicist had already suggested that 3I Atlas had a non-zero chance of being artificial. After the new trajectory data emerged, that assessment quietly gained weight inside scientific circles. Something wasn't adding up, and this was only the beginning, because within days, new data would confirm that the object wasn't just drifting off course. It was actively correcting itself. When the object corrected itself, at first, scientists hoped the strange movement of 3I Atlas was a one-time anomaly, perhaps a rare interaction with solar radiation or an unusual burst of outgassing. Space is unpredictable, after all. But that hope didn't last long, because the object didn't just drift again. It corrected itself. Observatories across Chile, Spain, and Japan began reporting a second deviation. This time, the movement was smaller, but far more alarming. Instead of drifting away randomly, 3I Atlas adjusted its path back toward its original trajectory, almost perfectly aligned with where it should have been before the anomaly. That detail changed everything. Natural objects don't self-correct. Comets don't check navigation errors. Asteroids don't perform course adjustments. Yet the data showed symmetry, an intentional response, not chaotic motion. The object moved away, then moved back with precision. inside the International Asteroid Warning Network. An internal alert was issued under a rare classification, pattern recognition event. This label is only used when behavior does not match any known natural phenomenon. In simple terms, the object was behaving less like a rock and more like a machine. Then came the confirmation scientists feared most. Infrared analysis from one of the world's most powerful ground-based telescopes detected a sudden thermal spike from 3I Atlas. The burst lasted roughly 12 minutes, far too brief to be caused by solar heating alone. Immediately afterward, the object cooled rapidly, as if whatever produced the heat had been intentionally shut down. That pattern was impossible to ignore. Heat signatures from comets usually rise gradually and fade slowly. This was different. This was controlled ignition followed by deliberate cutoff. Orbital analysts concluded that the object had produced measurable acceleration not linked to gravity. In other words, something had fired. Behind closed doors, space agencies reacted fast. Monitoring schedules were doubled. Radio arrays designed for deep space communication were quietly reactivated. Even systems typically reserved for asteroid impact scenarios were brought online. Not because 3I Atlas was heading toward Earth, but because its behavior was now considered actively unpredictable. The irony was impossible to miss. The object was moving away from our planet, yet Earth was treating it like a potential threat. Meanwhile, research teams began comparing the thermal curve to known propulsion systems. Chemical rockets didn't match. Ion drives didn't fit. Even experimental nuclear propulsion models failed to explain the data. What the signature did resemble, however, was something far more advanced. Magnetohydrodynamic acceleration, a theoretical propulsion method that uses electromagnetic fields to guide charged plasma. It's a concept humanity has barely begun to test, and only on paper. And propulsion wasn't the only anomaly. Astronomers noticed that the object's rotation rate, once stable, had begun fluctuating. The changes weren't random. They repeated every 247 seconds, again and again, like a heartbeat. At first, tumbling was suspected, but tumbling doesn't repeat with mathematical precision. The pattern was intentional. Some researchers proposed a chilling idea. The object wasn't just moving, it was signaling, as if responding to internal commands or broadcasting something outward. Then analysts traced its updated trajectory and found something that pushed concern into genuine alarm. The object's new path intersected with the orbit of Jupiter. Not a collision, but a dangerously close pass through the planet's powerful magnetosphere. To spacecraft engineers, the implication was obvious. This wasn't coincidence. It looked like preparation for a gravity assist, the same maneuver human probes use to steal energy from planets and alter speed or direction without fuel. At that moment, planetary defense monitoring quietly escalated to what NASA refers to as Level 3 contingency. This classification is used when an object demonstrates active control and unpredictable intent. And then, just as scientists try to anticipate its next move, every telescope on Earth lost it at the same time. The blackout that changed everything. What happened next was not gradual. It was not debated. It was not explained. It was instant. Within less than 10 minutes, observatories across the world began failing, one after another. Hawaii went silent, then Chile, then Italy, then South Africa. Data streams froze mid-transmission. Telemetry feeds flatlined. Even deep space radio arrays designed to function independently began reporting total signal loss. This wasn't a localized malfunction. It was global. For the first time in modern astronomical history, Earth lost synchronized visual and radio contact with a single object across every major observation network. The Deep Space Network failed. Backup arrays failed. Redundant systems showed nothing but noise. And in the center of all that silence was 3I Atlas. At first, scientists assumed the object had slipped behind a blind spot, perhaps hidden by solar interference or masked by cosmic background radiation. But that theory collapsed almost immediately. Orbital models showed no such alignment. There was nowhere it could hide. Yet it was gone. 47 minutes later, the data feeds returned. Every observatory reported the same result. The object was missing from every registered coordinate. It had not fragmented. It had not exploded. It had not decayed. It had simply disappeared. But something remained. Sensors began detecting a faint, low-frequency signal, far below the range of human hearing, but unmistakable to instruments. The signal pulsed with perfect regularity, once every 247 seconds, the same interval as the object's rotational anomaly. At first, technicians labeled it interference, background resonance, instrument drift, but as more data came in, the truth became impossible to ignore. The pulse wasn't fading, it wasn't weakening, and it wasn't random. It was synchronized. Every time the signal appeared, it aligned exactly with the last known spin rate of 3I Atlas, as if the object was no longer visible, but still present in some other form. Inside the International Asteroid Warning Network, the event received a restricted classification, Interstellar Signal Anomaly 2025-11. Access was limited. Public feeds went quiet. Official statements stopped. Then came the leak. During the 47-minute blackout window, telescopes briefly registered something else. A flash, extremely faint, highly directional, and perfectly aligned with Jupiter's orbital plane. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't a reflection. It was a displacement. The object hadn't vanished. It had jumped. The implications were terrifying. The flash suggested movement, not governed by gradual acceleration, but by instantaneous relocation. In simple terms, the object appeared to change position faster than light could reasonably travel between those points. Physics had no answer. For days, scientists tried to rationalize the data. Sensor error, cosmic lensing, software corruption. But every explanation failed under scrutiny. Independent systems, built by different nations using different hardware, had detected the same sequence. And then something even more unsettling happened. A week after the blackout, a faint reflection was detected far beyond Jupiter's orbit. The source was moving at a velocity that defied classical mechanics. When analysts compared the timestamp with prior data, their conclusion stunned the community. The signal matched the same 247-second interval, as if the object had not only survived, but had replicated its presence across space using the same resonant frequency. Soon after, another observatory confirmed it, then another. Each detection arrived exactly 247 seconds apart. The signal wasn't dispersing. It was multiplying. Some physicists proposed a radical idea. The object had learned to use gravity and space-time itself as a bridge, moving to the structure of the universe rather than across it. And if that was true, then the blackout hadn't been an accident. It had been a transition. The message hidden in time. For days after the global blackout, confusion ruled the scientific community. No official explanations were released. Space agencies offered carefully worded silence. Public data feeds remained frozen. Whatever had happened during those 47 missing minutes was being kept tightly sealed. Then, inside a restricted operations center, analysts made a discovery that changed the tone from fear to dread. Buried deep within corrupted data fragments from the blackout window was something that did not belong there. It wasn't imagery. It wasn't sensor noise. It wasn't telemetry. It was structure, a repeating binary sequence, embedded across multiple systems, synchronized perfectly with the same 247-second pulse that followed 3I Atlas since its first anomaly. This wasn't interference. It was deliberate encoding. When researchers began decoding the sequence, they assumed it would produce coordinates in space. That would have been unsettling enough. But it didn't. The decoded data pointed to coordinates in time. At first, the result was dismissed as corruption. Timing errors happen. Clocks drift. Data gets scrambled. But as reconstruction continued, the sequence grew clearer. The spatial reference matched the orbital path of Jupiter. But the timestamp didn't align with any current date. It pointed forward, exactly 6 years forward. As calculations stabilized, the implication became horrifyingly precise. The coordinates were not meant for Jupiter. They intersected with Earth's orbital plane, mapped to a future moment when our planet would pass through that exact region of space. The year was 2031. That was the moment the file was locked under the highest classification available to planetary defense systems, a level reserved for events considered capable of threatening civilization itself. Access logs vanished. Backup servers were wiped. Entire archives were pulled offline. Officially, none of this existed, but the silence didn't last. 3 months later, amateur astronomers in Australia began reporting something strange. Faint radio echoes, repeating every 247 seconds, emerging from within the asteroid belt. The signal was weak, almost indistinguishable from cosmic background noise. Almost. What terrified analysts wasn't the signal's strength. It was its direction. The pulse was no longer moving away from the solar system. It was circling back. Shortly after those reports surfaced, the International Asteroid Warning Network went dark completely. Public websites vanished. Observation logs disappeared. Open access feeds were erased. The official explanation was system restructuring. Behind the scenes, insiders whispered a different story. A private network of encrypted observatories had been established, operating beyond public oversight, outside traditional government channels. Its mission was singular: track whatever 3i Atlas had become and prepare for its return. The network's internal name was never confirmed publicly, but leaked documents reference one phrase again and again: Project Helios. The fear was no longer that the object had escaped. The fear was that it had learned our gravity, learned our orbital rhythm, learned how to move not just through space, but through the structure of space-time itself. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't running from anything. Maybe it was waiting. Every 247 seconds, that faint pulse still echoes across the solar system, so subtle it blends into cosmic noise, yet persistent enough to remind us that the story didn't end with disappearance. The universe did not forget 3i Atlas, and if the decoded coordinates were correct, then it didn't leave to explore. It left to return. What if it was never just passing by? Long after official channels went silent, long after public attention drifted elsewhere, one truth remained unchanged. Space did not return to normal. For centuries, humanity believed that the greatest danger from the cosmos would come in the form of impact. Asteroids, comets, collisions, objects moving blindly, following gravity, obeying predictable laws. That belief shaped every defense system we built. But 3i Atlas shattered that assumption. This was not an object that merely traveled through space. It observed, it adjusted, it responded. And if the recovered data is even partially accurate, it also planned. What disturbed scientists most was not the object's technology, but its restraint. At no point did it accelerate recklessly. It didn't broadcast loudly. It didn't announce itself. Every action appeared measured, efficient, and purposeful, as if minimizing exposure while maximizing information. That raises a deeply unsettling possibility. What if the anomalies weren't malfunctions? What if they were tests? The sideways movement could have been a calibration, measuring how closely Earth's instruments tracked it. The blackout may not have been an attack, but a transition into a state where our sensors simply no longer applied. And the 247-second pulse? That may not have been communication meant for us at all. It could have been synchronization. Across leaked research notes, one idea kept resurfacing: resonance. Not just electromagnetic resonance, but gravitational and temporal resonance. The same way bridges can collapse when vibrations match their natural frequency, space-time itself may respond when stimulated at precise intervals. If that's true, then 3i Atlas may have discovered something humanity hasn't yet mastered: a method of navigating the universe by aligning with its structure rather than fighting against it. And Earth, unknowingly, may have become part of that experiment. What makes the year 2031 so disturbing isn't just the date, it's the accuracy. The projected intersection point wasn't vague. It wasn't symbolic. It was precise down to kilometers, suggesting prior knowledge of Earth's orbit, mass distribution, and gravitational behavior. That level of prediction requires observation over time, which leads to a question no agency has answered publicly. How long has it been watching? Some researchers argue that 3i Atlas may not have originated recently. It could have passed through other systems, performing similar studies, mapping gravitational environments, learning how matter and space-time behave around inhabited worlds. Not as a conqueror, not as a weapon, but as a probe, a scout, or something even stranger, a traveler that doesn't belong to any civilization we would recognize, operating on motivations that don't align with threat or peace as we define them. The most chilling detail is this. After all the panic, after all the silence, nothing else happened. No announcement, no arrival, no disaster. Just waiting. And waiting may be the most dangerous phase of all. Because if an intelligence is capable of stepping outside conventional physics, then time itself becomes flexible. 6 years might not be a countdown. It could simply be a moment of alignment, a point when conditions become optimal. For what? We don't know. Every 247 seconds, the pulse still echoes faintly through space. Too weak to notice unless you're looking for it. Too consistent to ignore if you are. The universe hasn't closed the door on this story. It has left it slightly open.